Alrighty, folks. Let's go ahead and get started. What prayer requests do we have tonight? Anybody have any prayer requests for tonight? Okay. Good. Okay. All right. All right. Ms. TJ asked for prayers as well. She's got a medical thing going on right now, so be praying for her. Miss Mary Keene, Lauren Wright, Lacey and Daniel. If you want to put in my ridiculously dumb sickness at the moment, which I feel is the weirdest sickness on the planet. I have a salivary gland stone that's the size of a .22 caliber bullet in my chin, so it hurts. Apparently it just happened. So yeah, it started hurting Sunday night. A salivary gland stone. Believe me, I had to go to the ER and get a CAT scan for this thing. Okay. I didn't fall down this time. I feel like I'm winning. Most of the time it's Lee fell down, so I feel like it's better. Do what? No. But I think I should now. What should I name it? I'll think about that. I'll update y'all at the end. He's right here. Yeah, Waldo. That's the new name. It is settled. All right. So remember those in your prayer: Miss TJ, Mary, Lauren Wright, Lacey, and Daniel. And Daylen is going to preach for me tonight, or speak for me tonight, because I went to the doctor thinking he was going to deaden my whole face and take this thing out, but he decided not to. So I was hoping I could have it all wrapped up and not have to tell y'all, because I knew these two over here would give me a hard time, but and that one. But anyways, I have to drink 2 gallons of water a day and eat sour candies. That's my doctor prescription. Yeah, this is what's left of 2 gallons. It's been a situation. Let's put it that way. Anyways, all right. Yeah, if I leave, you'll know why. This is the ER. This is all being live streamed. Hey guys, this is the ER, a teledoc, and then the ER, and then an ear, nose, and throat doctor today. It's just started hurting Sunday night. He said it's probably been in there for years. It just now started hurting. I don't know. Daylen, come say something worthwhile.
Ooh, wee. Well, that is your public service health announcement for tonight. Stay healthy, drink water, pray often. If anyone is sick among you, let them pray. All right, so tonight we'll basically be looking at Barnabas, but leading up to that, I wanted to actually, go about it a little bit different than how the Bible Talk TV outline is. And so what I wanted to ask you guys are, what are some responsibilities that we have to one another? Because in the Bible, there's 100 occurrences of one another passages. So like one word, my wife's telling me to speak up. So like one word answers, what are some common responsibilities? Oh, what'd you say? There you go. Look at that. It's not that hard. So teach. There you go. Easy one. Any other ones? All right. Ooh, too sweet. I'll repeat myself. So the question is, what are some Christian responsibilities that we have to one another? So we have teach, encourage. Yes, yes. There we go. Any other ones? Okay, yeah, praying for one another. Anything else? There you go, love one another. So I know you guys know other ones, because like I said, there's there's 100 occurrences in the New Testament, and the reason why I asked you guys that question is with us talking about Barnabas. Goodness, I keep wanting to say Barnabas instead of Barnabas. My apologies. So in us talking about Barnabas tonight, that name is actually a nickname for son of encouragement. And Barnabas' actual name is Joseph the Levite, which when I found that out, I'm like, oh wow, that's kind of like, the classic, someone's called by nicknames for so long, you think that's that person's name, but no, his actual name is Joseph the Levite, so that's just a fun fact for you guys out there. So yes, with encouragement being one of our responsibilities to one another, I want to actually break down encouragement for you guys. And so what do you guys think are some different ways we can encourage one another? Like, what do you think are some different ways? Sending a card? Absolutely. Yeah, card, letter, written down encouragement. Indeed, visiting people, those who are sick, or even just the occasional visit to a good friend or someone maybe you've lost touch with. Any other? There you go. Of course, worshiping together. Don't know why this is acting up. But yeah, worshiping together is definitely another way that we can encourage each other. In fact, in the Old Testament, when a word like encouragement is brought about, so there's different words that represent encouragement in the Hebrew language. So what I mean by that is there's one word known as nachem, and basically that means like a strong sigh. So a way to think about it is if someone is going through, thank you. So if, let's say for instance, someone is going through a tough time and they might not be saying a lot, but you can just tell by their posture that they're really down. This Hebrew word nachem is basically like you being right next to them, and instead of you guys saying anything, you just let out a long, it's kind of like you have that weight of the world on you, but you're sitting next to that person and you're just basically being in the moment. So a passage that we could look at to sort of better understand that Hebrew word is Isaiah chapter 40, verses 1 through 2. And could someone actually read that passage for us? Yep, Isaiah chapter 40, verses 1 through 2. Indeed. And so that, of course, is Isaiah speaking a prophecy towards Israel. And what he's speaking towards them, it brings about that idea of, being there in this tough time with the Israelites, God wanting to basically comfort them. And so another Hebrew word that kind of demonstrates encouraging one another is chazak. And so that word in Hebrew means to give strength. In fact, when we think about Joshua chapter 1, verse 9, how God tells Joshua to be strong and courageous, that's an easy example to see that idea of being strengthened. It's basically, bolstering you up to prepare you for something. In fact, could someone read for us Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 28? And you'll see a similar presentation of God strengthening Moses. Yep, Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 28. Awesome. And so, again, God, he's doing the encouraging. He's telling Moses to encourage Joshua for what he's about to embark on. So God's giving strength to Joshua. And then a third way that we can see encouragement, this time in the New Testament, there's a Greek word that's known as parakaleo, I believe. And so that word there in Greek just means to call someone near. And what's interesting about that definition for that Greek word is, when you call someone near, you're basically inviting them towards you, or you're going towards someone. Kind of like the other two Hebrew words that we saw, it's this idea of being close, being in someone's life. And so when thinking about this Greek word, parakaleo, we can look over at John chapter 14, verse 26. And if someone could read John chapter 14, verse 26, we'll be able to see a verse that demonstrates parakaleo. Correct?
But the Helper, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you all things and bring to your remembrance all that I have said.
Excellent. And so in this situation, God sends the Holy Spirit, and with the Holy Spirit basically being the one that's with us and that's near, we can see another sense of encouragement, that God is going to send someone to be close to us, to really help us, to strengthen us, to basically be sympathetic with us when we're going through those tough times. And so these three verses, again, are just to show different ways that encouragement is demonstrated in the Old and the New Testament. And so what does encouragement look like for Christians, thinking about some of the answers you guys mentioned, but then also considering in the verses that we've read? I would say that encouragement looks like coming near to someone and giving support. Encouragement for Christians also looks like giving and receiving between at least two people, because, it's hard to really encourage yourself, but when you have someone else coming from the outside that really knows you, that understands you, it really makes things sweeter. But then the last thing is motivating each other to carry on in our walk of faith. So with those are three ways, including what you guys mentioned, that encouragement can be done between Christians. Now, with Barnabas being known as the son of encouragement, or at least that being his nickname, now we're going to take some time to just look at 7 ways that he encouraged the Christians during the New Testament. And the nice part about Barnabas is, we can see the encouragement that he did, but then we can also see someone like Paul, who was a recipient of a lot of his encouragement. And so to start things off, can someone read for us Acts chapter 4, verses 36 through 37? Again, that's Acts chapter 4, verses 36 through 37. All right. And so this is the first way that we can see Barnabas being an encourager. Basically, he was wealthy, but he had a resource that he was willing to provide to the church. And so in his generosity, he's able to help the church with a need. And so for us, there's a lot of needs, not only within the church, but outside of the church, whether it's with friends or with family. And so for us today, what do you think are some needs that are just common in today's society? Say again? You said hope? Yes. And so in thinking about this idea of generosity, how can we be generous with, or I like how you said hope. So in trying to think about this idea of generosity, in what ways can our generosity build hope to someone? Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed, indeed. So what he was saying is that when you basically spend time with someone and then they're able to see the joy that you have, that can lead them to be curious and basically open a door for you to share more about your life and, of course, sharing more about the gospel. So, of course, a way that we can be generous, if not monetarily, is definitely with our time, being intentional and such. Did anyone else have any other ideas of like, oh, mm-hmm. Mm. Right. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gotcha. And so that's a fair point. Thinking about Paul and Silas when they were in prison as an example of them being generous, them singing praises and or saying prayers and singing praises unto God despite their situation. You know, an environment where they're just being giving of themselves, and for the people surrounding them, I'm sure that leads to a lot of questions. So, very, very good example there. So if no one has any other thoughts on the first way that Barnabas has shown generosity or has encouraged people through generosity, we'll now look at the second way that he's shown encouragement, and that is by ministering. So can someone read for us Acts chapter 9, verses 26 to 28? Uh, 28.
So Saul stayed with them and moved about for years, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord.
Awesome. And so in this situation, the disciples in Jerusalem basically weren't aware that Paul was converted. And so when Barnabas brings Paul down, a lot of those disciples are surprised. And so the way that Barnabas is able to encourage through ministering is he's trying to represent Paul. He's trying to explain to disciples that, hey, Paul, I've seen what he can do when he has the right perspective, when he understands who God really is and what Jesus is really about. And so by Paul being represented by Barnabas, we're able to see Barnabas being an encourager in a different light. We're able to see that, you know, he's willing to put aside his reputation, or he's willing to put aside maybe the convenience of being a well-known Christian amongst the Jew or amongst the Christians in Jerusalem. You know, he's willing to inconvenience himself for the sake of helping Paul to be better understood. And for us today, I really can't think of off the fly examples, but I'm sure we come into interactions or we come into moments where it's easier for us to stay in our comfort zone and to not really stretch ourselves. Because when looking at the situation with Barnabas, you know, just imagine what he was risking, especially if Paul was a false believer or only wanted the attention to get in and then cause chaos. So for someone like Barnabas to actually represent Paul before these disciples in Jerusalem, that was a tall order. And so for us today, you know, we have to think about those situations when we're at that crossroad of, should we minister for the sake of this person who's an outcast, or should we keep the status quo? You know, should I be the Christian that just doesn't shake any feathers, or should I be the Christian that's willing to say, hey, there's an issue here, let's work together? Does anyone else have any thoughts about, you know, ministering? Gotcha. Well, that's a fair point. In fact, thinking about how many times we've led an invitation, like, what do you think guys think that is? That's that opportunity for one of us or someone, another Christian from another church who's come to visit, to have that opportunity to come forth, and for us, to basically be able to love on that person and encourage them. And if that person goes down, there might be half the congregation that thinks, oh, there goes so and so. But what about those Christians that have spent time to know that brother or sister? They can be like a Barnabas and basically, minister, speak on their behalf and help the congregation understand, like, this brother or sister really has gone through the effort to repent. So now we'll look at a third way that Barnabas has encouraged the fellow Christians, and the third way would be through brotherly love. So can someone read for us Acts chapter 11 and verses 22 all the way to 24? Awesome. And so in this situation here, the church in Antioch was just recently established because Christians were escaping persecution in one area and basically made their way over to Antioch and started a church there. So when it talks about they heard this news, basically the disciples in Jerusalem were like, hey, let's send some older Christians up there to help shepherd, to help make sure these new Christians have a solid foundation. And so think about who they sent. They sent Barnabas to go up there. And so this is another way that he demonstrates encouragement. He's going up there. Brotherly love is how it's outlined in the lesson. And so with this idea of brotherly love, how would you guys define that or describe that phrase? Don't worry, I'm not throwing a hardball at you. You're all looking at me like I got the answer, and I kind of do, but y'all got the answer, so what you want? But yes, how would you describe brotherly love? Don't worry. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, you have that care for them, a deep care and such. Yeah, letting them know, exactly. Letting them know, especially being with them in tough times and all that. Any other ways that you would describe brotherly love? Or maybe even an analogy. Come on now. I know some of y'all are creative enough to give me something. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, say it again? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, indeed. You guys are making some great points. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but I think we've all experienced brotherly love to some extent, especially we have siblings that we like, or, we got friends that we've maybe grown up with and just have a lot of experiences with. In fact, I would say that's one defining attribute of brotherly love. You've had experiences. You have stuff that you guys can go through the hall of remembrance and be like, do you remember this time? Do you remember that time? In fact, for some people, brotherly love includes you helped me become a brother or sister in Christ. And so that's why I asked you guys that question, because I'm not just trying to throw low-hanging fruit so we can just, be like, oh, this is an easy question. But I want you guys to remember that, we've all experienced brotherly love to some extent. And when looking at Barnabas here and what he was able to do for the church of Antioch, we know that church was a large church. So the fact he was willing to go to a large church and help instill brotherly love in them, that's pretty inspiring. And for us as a small congregation, I guess you could say there's really no excuse. We can execute brotherly love 10x and such. And so that's one passage that we can see how Barnabas demonstrates brotherly love. But I also want to turn your guys' attention to Acts chapter 11, verses 27 to 30. So I'll read that for us. And it says, "Now in these days prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch, and one of them, named Agabus, stood up and foretold by the Spirit that there would be a great famine over all the world. This took place in the days of Claudius. So the disciples determined, everyone according to his ability, to send relief to the brothers living in Judea. And they did so, sending it to the elders by the hand of Barnabas and Saul." And so this, I would say, is a second example of how Barnabas demonstrates that brotherly love, because not only was he willing to go to a large, newly established congregation like Antioch and help build them up, he's also willing to basically inconvenience himself and go, well, I don't have a map here, but he's traveling 300 miles? Okay, there you go. 300 miles with this large bag of offerings to go help out the disciples in Judea. Now, I know we have our luxuries today of trucks and stuff to, carry stuff, but imagine if you had to carry a lot of stuff 300 miles away to go help your fellow brother and sister in Christ. And so, is that kind of example that for us today hopefully inspires us, and just to know that that we too have that capability to demonstrate that brotherly love. And for Barnabas to do that, he must truly understand what it means to be a Christian and just understand the power of the gospel. And so the fourth example I would say that Barnabas demonstrates with encouragement would be simply teaching. And that is mentioned pretty straightforward here in Acts chapter 13, verse 1. And so in this verse it says, now there were in the church at Antioch prophets and teachers, Barnabas, Simeon, who was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, a lifelong friend of Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. And so that verse just simply mentions another aspect of what Barnabas did for the church. And so by him being a teacher, as one of us mentioned, our responsibilities to one another, he's teaching the gospel. And in teaching, there's various topics you can teach on. And so, that really doesn't need much explaining. But a question I'll ask to you guys is, I thought I had a question. Oh no. Guess that's an example of the Lord's like, nope, not that question. All right, well, I can't remember the question, so we'll just go on to the fifth way then that Barnabas demonstrates encouragement towards other people. And so that fifth way is by unity. Unity. Yeah. And so, can someone read for us Acts chapter 15, verses 1 and 2?
Some men came down from Judea and were teaching the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. And after Paul and Barnabas had no
Yep.
And after Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension taken with them, Paul and Barnabas and some
Awesome. And so this is another example that we have. And by Barnabas representing, by Barnabas being an encourager, he's demonstrating that by the way of unity. And so when we look at this situation, the Christians are facing that whole ordeal of when we have Gentiles that want to be Christian, should they first become Jew or should they become Jew by being circumcised, or should we just disregard that? And with this issue coming up, we see that Paul and Barnabas are basically at the forefront in trying to resolve this. And that's why when looking at Barnabas, we're able to see his desire for unity is a way of encouragement, because he understands that, if the church can't be unified over this, it can really have a bad ripple effect, especially thinking about that church he was helping out in Antioch. If he went there and gave different ideas about circumcision and such, just imagine that congregation at Antioch being a large congregation and then probably having 5 splits over. So for someone like Barnabas, he probably understands the impact of getting our doctrine right is very important for the sake of the gospel and such. And so that's the situation that's going on there. But then if we look over at Acts chapter 15, verse 12, it says, "And all the assembly fell silent, and they listened to Barnabas and Paul as they related what signs and wonders God had done through them among the Gentiles." And again, the situation is still related around how do we incorporate the Gentiles into Christianity. And what Barnabas is doing is he's telling the disciples what he's seen. When the Gentiles become Christians, they're able to do amazing stuff for God. And so Barnabas is basically speaking from his experience and trying to let these Christians understand that they don't have to be circumcised in order to receive the promises of God. All they have to do is accept Christ. Like, that's what the gospel is about. And even Paul, he understood that greatly. And so, again, another way that Barnabas encourages people is by way of unity. He understands that it's not merely about trying to keep the status quo or not trying to ruffle the feathers of the Jews. He understands the impact of when the gospel is taught correctly, it allows the Gentiles to be 100% in line to receive the promises of God, just like a Jew. And so now we'll turn our attention to the 6th way that Barnabas encourages people, and that's actually by reconciliation. So, let's see. So the best way to see this example is if we turn to Acts chapter 15. And can someone read for us in Acts chapter 15, verses 36 through 41? Awesome. And so in this situation, after Paul and Barnabas were at Antioch for some time, helping to build up the congregation, they decided to, on their next journey. And so Barnabas wanted to bring John Mark along. However, Paul disagreed with that. And due to their disagreement, they decided to go their separate ways. And so when thinking about how Barnabas, a way that he encourages is through reconciliation, is just realizing how despite the sharp disagreement that they had, they were still able to reconcile, which we see when reading Colossians chapter 4, verse 10. And this, of course, is Paul writing, but the fact that Paul was able to write this just implies that him and Barnabas must have been able to reconcile their difference. And if I can find Colossians chapter 4, verse 10, then you'll see what I mean. Cool. So in Colossians chapter 4, verse 10, it reads, Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, greets you, and Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, concerning whom you have received instructions. If he comes to you, welcome him. And so when seeing the fact that Paul was willing to mention John Mark, and the fact that John Mark is assisting Paul again, it's strongly believed that Barnabas and Paul were able to reconcile their differences, and basically John Mark was able to help out Paul again in his missionary journeys. And so we can speculate all day long as far as how that conversation went. Like, was it a shout match? Was it a bro time where they hugged it out? We don't know. But a question I have for you guys is, when you do have disagreements with other Christians, I guess, how do you try to go about it? You don't have to give me the details. I don't need the tea. But what principles sort of are at the forefront when you have those differences? Okay, yeah, go to the individual one-on-one. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Indeed, indeed. So going back to the Bible, having the scripture to help support where the differences might lie. Absolutely. And anyone else? Yeah. Okay. Indeed. And when you mention like the being that active listener, trying to understand where they come from, it reminds me again of what does encouragement look like for Christians. That whole coming near to someone and giving support. Like, if you're willing to come near, then you probably are more willing to be that active listener and be attentive to what that person needs. So indeed, those are definitely some principles or just a mindset we can have when we go into reconcile. Because we probably have seen, maybe not in our lives, but in someone else's life, the damage that happens when reconciliation isn't there. It's easy to see a church rift, but just imagine the people that stay but are either resentful, bitter, not letting it out. So reconciliation that hasn't been done yet is very much damaging, and it's one of those things where, kind of like if a house is built on a poor foundation, you probably won't know that the house is on a poor foundation until it's too late, until the cracks in the walls or different stuff like that. And so in thinking about Barnabas here and just knowing that despite him having a sharp disagreement with Paul, keep in mind who was an apostle, like, he still was willing to reconcile. And so hopefully for us, we're not too, I guess you could say, far away from trying to reconcile with people that either we have a misunderstanding with or have been wronged by and such. Oh, yeah, pride. Absolutely. Indeed. So pride definitely can get in the way of reconciliation. And so now, for the last way that Barnabas encourages people, we'll turn our attention over to 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1. And can someone read that for us? Yep. Yeah, that's basically it. So, in that verse, sort of the main takeaway is just the fact that Paul says to imitate him as he imitates Christ. And when we look back at Acts and we see how Paul came on the scene, we know good and well that Christ first intervened, got his attention, and then Ananias helped him to be obedient, and then eventually Paul went and was doing the work of the Lord. But at some point, him and Barnabas, their path interacted. And just think about how many verses or situations of the Bible was Paul and Barnabas, Barnabas and Paul. I think when Paul writes this, when he writes the whole imitating me as I imitate Christ, Paul has an example of someone that he was imitating, a fellow Christian that was being obedient, being faithful to God. And so when thinking about how Barnabas has encouraged people, it's safe to say that he's done it also through imitation. He's done it through, hey, follow me because I'm following Christ. And so for us today, and you guys don't have to answer it out loud, but think of people in your lives that have been examples that there's either something about the way they carry themselves in their faith that you want to imitate. There's maybe some approach they have to demonstrating the gospel that helps you to be better at demonstrating the gospel. And so to kind of wrap things up, tonight we looked at just 7 ways that Barnabas demonstrates encouragement to the saints in Acts. And, there are, I'm sure, a host of other ways he's done it, but either we don't have an account of that in Acts or we just didn't go through those verses. But what I hope you guys really just take away from this is that, 1, Barnabas, he was willing to give away his land and his money. 2, he was willing to set aside his reputation for the sake of helping a fellow Christian that was being misunderstood. 3, he was also willing to give away his time. Think about all those mission trips that he went on with Paul. And then the 4th thing is he was willing to give away his ministry. Basically, having Paul, who we know was kind of like just out here getting it for the Lord, like Barnabas was willing to not try to take the spotlight. He was willing to show Paul the ropes, but at some point he just sat back and continued to encourage him, but he wasn't at the forefront. And so when looking at these takeaways and thinking about Barnabas, hopefully you can either see yourself like a Barnabas, or if not, someone who is. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Lee. Oh, no, the kids are not out there. All right.
I left my prayer request. Thanks, Mom. All righty, folks. All righty. We've got a couple prayer requests already tonight. Miss TJ is in need of our prayers, so please be praying for her. She's got some medical stuff going on right now. Mary Keene is at home. She's been hurting a whole lot lately. Lauren Wright is better but not well yet, so we need to keep praying for her. And Lacey and Daniel, Megan's sister, and her boyfriend are dealing with some custody stuff and that sort of thing with Daniel's kids, so be praying for them. Anybody else have any other prayers? I'm not going to mention mine because y'all made fun of me last time. No. How do you spell that? Do you know? Okay.
It's the son of Carol.
All righty. Skylar, for she. Yes, sir. Paul. All righty. Anybody else? Oh, Mr. Norm. Last we heard, he was still in the hospital. So be praying for him and Miss Jimmy as well. Let me write that down so don't forget it. And Miss Mabel, Merle said she was on the phone with her, when was it? Yesterday, and she broke her foot. So be praying for Miss Mabel as well. And maybe call her and encourage her a little bit. I know she would appreciate that. Anybody else have any others? Oh yeah, Sunday we're gonna. Oh, that hurt. Sunday we're gonna have some snacks next door for the mamas and whatnot. So, before Bible class or between Bible class and worship, y'all go get some snackage, moms. And I guess, listen, it's gonna be there. So Gary, go next door on Sunday. He wasn't paying attention to me, so he's out of luck. No. So we'll have some refreshments next door on Sunday morning, in honor of Mother's Day. Anybody else have any others? Oh, that reminds me. Next Friday we'll have a movie night next door as well. All right, is that it? All righty, Lenny, I believe you had the invitation, so I'm gonna leave it up to you.
So tonight in our little class that our little person wouldn't listen to, we was discussing Gideon and how God will use you regardless of how big or small you are. So, it could go, I was trying to get him to understand, it could go down as far as him, just little things that he can do with God using him as far as towards his friends, because we seem to have a problem with him wanting to be a bully. So trying to get him to understand that, he can do things to show God just like the bigger people can do to show God. You don't have to look at your age. You don't have to look at how long you've been a Christian, or even if you have, you can still apply what you learn at church to do yourself better towards your friends. So with that being said, if you need prayers, if you need anything, regardless of how you are, what size you are, how big you are, how big your faith is, you can come forward and ask for prayers as we stand and sing.
I forgot to ask you the song again.
First and last verse. Had it? Let's see. We read of a place that's called heaven, made for the
Pure and the free, these truths in God's word He has given. How beautiful heaven must be! How beautiful heaven must be! Sweet home of the happy and free, fair haven of rest for the weary. How beautiful heaven must be! Pure waters of life there are flowing, and all who drink may be free. Their jewels of splendor are glowing. How beautiful heaven must be! How beautiful heaven must be! Sweet home of the happy and free, fair haven of rest for the weary. How beautiful heaven must be!
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to come together and be faithful. Lord, we thank you for that you said and that we lead us to serve with help and ask you to be with us all and please speak. Lord, we really want to know the prayer. We want to know it. It's very much to track. Keep us safe when we need you. Give us our sins. Christ's name we pray. Amen.